Hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Laura Greeley, the Regional VP at IEB Southeast Asia and India, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for the latest in our Revolve webinar series. I'm delighted to introduce you to this week's webinar, where we turn our attention to the healthcare industry amidst the backdrop of the ongoing pandemic, as well as consumer behaviour and attitude shifts. This industry is facing unprecedented change and digital disruption. Whilst this is, of course, quite demanding, there are opportunities to adapt, improve, and grow from new ways of working. This is an interactive session, so please do feel free to use the Q&A function to ask questions during the next 45 minutes. Our moderator today, Susan Josie, Managing Partner of Havas Life Sorrento, brings over 35 years experience in the health and wellness domain, as well as being Managing Partner of Havas Life Sorrento. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Susan to introduce the panel and today's session.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much, Laura. In the continuum of healthcare, from self-care to self-medication to managing chronic illnesses, consumers are taking charge of their health in this new world. In their quest to stay safe, and of course, they are turning to the internet as their solution, be it in terms of seeking information, addressing their essential needs, looking for ways to improve the health quotient of their lifestyle, or even in terms of allaying their fears. On the other hand, the pharma industry's key customer, the doctors, are slowly and steadily onboarding remote consulting platforms and adopting digital tools to stay strong in their business. In all of this, one big question staring at us is whether we as product marketeers are slow in adopting the realities of this new normal. Are we gearing up to be ahead of the curve, or will we be lagging and playing catch up while our consumers and customers are speeding away on the digital highway? So friends, for the next 30 odd minutes, we would like to dissect this across the kind of businesses we represent and the specific transformations that are getting implemented in our domain. We will also set aside 10 to 15 minutes for your Q&A. I will be looking at the Q&A and asking those questions as we chug along this discussion. So without much delay, I would like to introduce our two panelists for today. Manoj Saxena, the Managing Director of Bayer Zydus Pharma Private Limited. He's also an EC member of the OPPI, which is the leading industry association in healthcare. Manoj has been a part of the Asia-Pacific leadership team and has actually worked across a lot of markets in the region and has also evolved a lot of regional and country-specific strategies. With a deep understanding of healthcare industry geographies, Manoj has a broad experience across functions and have taken senior roles in sales and marketing function, business analysis, and general management. Welcome, Manoj. Our next panelist is from Singapore, Samir Desai, Global Business Leader, former Global Head of Consumer Healthcare, Mundi Pharma. Samir is an entrepreneurial global business leader with a proven track record of almost 25 years in growing businesses into profitable market leadership positions across companies like P&G, Kellogg's, Friesland, GSK, and Mundi Pharma, and has been based in Mumbai, Dubai, London, and Singapore. In the last role as Global Head of Consumer Health for Mundi Pharma, where he joined as employee number 1, he grew the business 39 times in 6 years while setting up a new global consumer health business unit from scratch. He was also the Regional Vice President, Asia Pacific for the World Federation of Advertisers from 2016 to 2020. So that's the two August panelists that we have, and really a pleasure to start this discussion. So I wanted to start beginning with a little bit on the consumer healthcare industry and then going into pharma. In fact, it was really interesting, it just happened today morning where I had gone down to buy bread and I found Unilever, actually they have a bread division called Modern Food, and they were actually launching a new bread called Immuno Bread. Okay, so Immuno Bread has got turmeric in it. It has got all sorts of natural ingredients. And I saw quite a few people asking about this bread, which only tells us that somewhere there is a huge different kind of awakening that's happening, right? And according to Google Trends data, index search volumes for immunity rose by 500%. There is more such data for many OTC products. So, Samir, how do you see this whole wellness industry addressing this opportunity through its products and services? What changes do we foresee in terms of the product mix and the kind of marketing approach that we need to take, given that consumers have this propensity to pop pills even more today and defend themselves versus all that they are foreseeing in the future?
Yeah, so I think Susan, you already touched upon this, right? That the immunity trend is the one that is growing phenomenally. So the likes of vitamin C, zinc, vitamin C supplemented with zinc, selenium, rosehip, all those kind of products are just literally going through the roof. And we've had numbers of 300 to 500% growth in all of these supplements. But I think also what's happening is that a lot of natural remedies are coming into mainstream. And I think the change that you're seeing also is that clinical trials have started on natural remedies. So if you look at the likes of turmeric, pomegranate, curcumin, eucalyptus extract, you're seeing that people have actually started clinical trials behind these products as well. Because up until now, it was seen as accepted knowledge that these built immunity. But actually, do they protect against COVID? Do they actually have antiviral properties? And can you clinically show it? That's, I think, a key trend that's coming in from a consumer point of view. But I think one thing which is not really about the product and the claims, I think is really my big discussion is about the moral compass of companies in terms of making these claims when they're developing new products. Because you're seeing a lot of people develop products or launch products with claims around immunity boosting, protect against COVID, or even they don't even say protect against COVID, but they imply it and consumers take away is that. And so you've got antibacterial products claiming protection against disease when they're implying COVID, but you know it's an antibacterial product, so it's not going to kill viruses. So similarly, again, you're putting in additives of 1% or 2% turmeric or something and claiming immunity boosting. Really, the question is, do you have the data actually that it's going to do it, or are you just playing on people's fears? So I think that's one area which marketers really need to be careful about, and it's really your own moral compass that will guide you in terms of how you actually make these claims and communicate to consumers.
Great. In fact, Samir, it was interesting that you spoke about clinical trials because, just I think about a week back, J&J, launched a global challenge and they announced something like $50,000 grant for any new product ideas in the space of course, immunity and,
Right.
defense and all of that. And they actually said that, if it is supported with clinical trials and they have clinical data, even if it is real world evidence, they actually would like to get into market in the next 18 months. To me, that was something which was stark because, on one side, we have products like you rightly said, according to the companies, do they have the data? And the other side, companies are actually accelerating this process in a big way, and trying to see how to take advantage of this space because consumers are definitely looking for solutions, Anything? Samir.
And one more thing was also, I think, apart from pills, so a Singapore-based company, Imagine Labs, which is on personalized nutrition, they've just gone into the immune space right now. They've launched a number of new products with ginseng vitamin blends. But what they've also done is they've added a DNA test to it, which looks at one's genetic tendencies for nutritional deficiencies. So again, the key question is how much of this is fiction, how much of this is reality, and how much of this is science-based is always the question. But really, that's where everyone's going, that depending on what you need as a person, we'll give you the right nutrition and the right nutrients.
Yeah, sure. Manoj, would you have any, thing to add?
I think from a consumer standpoint, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just to add to what Samir was saying, a lot of consumer companies, and I'm not saying consumer health companies, companies take patient safety as an obligation. Yeah. So they do some things and look at, in their manufacturing units and feel safety is okay, let's launch it. Yeah. But I think for a lot of health companies and pharma companies particularly, it's a commitment. I think safety lies in the DNA of what at the end patients will get as an outcome, and safety is integral part of that. So that's a commitment, it's not an obligation. So once you have a commitment, you are more data driven, you are more logical, you are rational in thinking through of what makes sense. But in a vacuum like this, when there is, definitely credible information's lacking significantly, and I don't think it's only the narrative which in the pharma industry can change it, but also a play of media, a play of the social media, particularly the WhatsApp universities. Yeah, there I think we need to be mindful on terms of how do we not say something is wrong, like the modern bread with I don't know what it is. Yeah, I also saw it somewhere on the Twitter feed. But how do you process that information? I think the whole point of view, which Samir was also saying, is let's look at those things, because that's good if clinical trials are being done in a designed manner, and there is a lot of data on whether herbal drugs or TCM or a lot of categories where traditionally people have believed in them, and there is a lot of trust. If that trust can be translated back with a lot of data, and I'm sure that's a category which consumers are going to lap it up. What is critical here for patients is to get the information. And during the COVID time, there is a lot of things floating around. So I think in that space, they would like something which boosts their immunity. If somebody says turmeric can boost it, they are fine to take turmeric. The homeopathic drugs are being circulated in every society in Mumbai. I'm sure, Susan, in your society as well. So I think that's where the whole point of patient safety has to be the central pivot there, and I think some of the companies are doing so, and also getting benefits from there, but not is needed from a consumer brand or an FMCG perspective.
Yeah, fabulous. In fact, taking a leap from what Manoj you just mentioned about the information flow, the media, the channel. Comes back to one very important question, really, how has this COVID situation in the last 4 months really pivoted the whole media spending, and, what kind of platforms have been used? Of course, we know from a pharma doctor perspective, I'll come to that a little later, but if I had to directly talk to consumers, it's of course a no-brainer that to a large extent digital will be playing in a major way. But how is the whole media mix changing in the new scenario? And going ahead, will there be big changes of this nature? So Samir, you may want to take it from what your experience has been.
Yeah, again, I think the entire healthcare industry has been really not as progressive from a digital communication point of view. And a lot of these barriers have been internal, where people have just thought their internal compliance and regulatory won't allow us to communicate directly to patients. I think that's significantly changing right now. And a lot more consumer companies are doing, and even pharma companies, as far as allowed by regulations, communicating directly to patients. We're seeing that video consumption is just going through the roof everywhere, right? So obviously, spends on the likes of a Facebook and a Twitter are increasing dramatically. I think there are nuances because there are less pictures to be taken outside. Instagram use has gone down in certain cases, and Facebook has gone up, Twitter has gone up because of much more news. So I think those nuances is what you will need to understand for your own consumers as to where they're pivoting. Video content on social media, so the likes of a YouTube and a TikTok, is absolutely gone through the roof. And this is where your need to create really engaging video content for consumers and your patients becomes absolutely critical. So I think those are the broad moves that are happening. And more companies, I think they don't have a choice, that they don't have outdoors, they don't have other means of communication. It is digital where most spends are going. And digital, for the first time, has overtaken traditional media in a big way in the past few months, which is always the trend, but it's accelerated by the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll move to a little bit more closer to the pharma, where we talk about patient consumers interchangeably. In fact, I always call patients as super consumers today. They are no longer just patients. They know the product much more faster than what sometimes even the doctors know the product. I was privy to one of the launches of a COVID product a month ago, which was for favipiravir, which is a mild to moderate case. It was to be launched, and it was interesting how much the consumers knew. In fact, we didn't anticipate so much traffic on the website. The website crashed because that's the amount of traffic that came, and the company was not even prepared because they thought that they will speak to the doctors and then the doctors will talk to the consumers and they will go through the real rudimentary way of doing things. So really, if you see, phrases like post-COVID, post-lockdown, these are all becoming obsolete and redundant. I think this is the new reality. This is going to be staying for the pharma industry because more and more patients will be self-managing their conditions and they will consult doctors during serious situations. Another reality which is coming up is doctors onboarding a lot of teleconsult. I read somewhere that the teleconsultation has gone up by 500% of HCPs onboarding, and we have almost 80% of doctors actually using teleconsult for the first time, which is also telling you that it's not just a metro phenomenon. Almost 45% of these doctors are from non-metro cities. So over to you, Manoj. What changes are you envisaging? I mean, this is obviously a question on everyone's mind. What are we going to do with our 100,000 folks? There is no patient with the doctor in the clinic. What really is going to happen? What kind of sales and marketing infrastructures are being planned? How are we managing all of this? So this is a big question, but I would like both of you guys to help us understand the space with your examples if you can.
Yeah, no, sure, Susan. Yeah. But let me tell you that digitalization in the pharma industry is pre-COVID phenomena. It's not post-COVID. It's not during COVID. Yeah, but there has been a lot of talk around digitalization because it's the only medium left probably during the COVID period of time, and that's why the whole acceleration has happened. Yeah. But importantly, if you look at even EY report of 2018, pharma industry particularly is laggard, and more so in Asia Pacific. Most of the it talks about the digitalization index. Yeah, most of the companies were either in developing or learning stage in digitalization, and I think that's where all the pharma companies are. Some could be slightly higher, but mostly as beginners. Now, what COVID definitely does is it accelerates because the customers and the consumers are ready. Yeah, a lot of time I think we all can do a lot of work on digital without looking at the customer's understanding what does he wants. Yeah, sometimes we put forward a wish on digital but not realizing what customer wants. I think that is where people would focus upon. Let me also give you one facet which I think we are privileged in pharma industry, where the access to our customer, which is doctors or pharmacies, is extremely high. I have not seen any other industry where the customers are being met physically once or twice in a month. Yeah, actually, some of the industries have never seen their customers. Never. If I've never seen my insurance guys, maybe I've seen an insurance agent who's a third-party distributor, but I've never seen my insurance. I've never seen a banking guy. Forget an oil and gas guy of Shell or Indian Oil. Yeah. And those are the companies which pay huge amount of money to get customer data and to to look at it. So we are in a unique scenario where we have access to customers. Customers are willing to meet us. The recent IQVIA data also said that 60-70% customers are very keen to meet the industry, either physical or digital. So I think we should not underestimate the role which our sales force plays in managing our relationship, scientific communication and all that. The question is, a lot of time we refer digital. Will it change? Yeah. Is there a shift happening? I think we should not look at as a comparison versus this and that, whether physical or digital. The ideal way is looking at it, how do we enhance the share of voice? And any brand or any company which will increase the share of voice using both the channels, or there are other channels as well, would greatly benefit. And that's what I think a lot of companies are looking at. Three things which I would say holds the key here. And then I'll ask Samir to, give his thoughts is, what is extremely critical would be people. Yeah, if we are upskilling people at this point of time, looking at, because in the past we were hiring a sales rep, because you talked about sales reps. Yeah, we were looking at we call it as a particular we model the straw person, right? You look at certain competencies which he requires in physical. I think digital is something, or which definitely where analytics are needed and a lot of other competencies and skill sets are needed. So I think people is something where a lot of companies are having a rethinking. Is the second point is around platforms. You can create your own platforms, but I think that there is a capacity for doctors to look at the platform, whether it's through telemedicine or for webinars. So I think a lot of partnerships and the right platforms and ecosystem which is easy. Yeah. And I use the word FANG, why there is on every mobile phone, there is Facebook, there is Amazon, there is Netflix, there is Google, primarily because they are intuitive, they are user friendly. And this is the experience which a doctor is already having, or a patient or a consumer is already having. So if your digital strategy is having that FANG lens, I think then it would be easier. Yeah. So platform. And the third is, I think, processes. We need to revisit a lot of processes internally, externally, which I think in the post-COVID world, I don't know what does that mean post-COVID, but yes, moving now. I think those are the three things which would help the customer to get the right experience, but also a lot of understanding of the pharma companies to read the data, look at the analytics, and then change course. Yeah. But digitalization is here to stay at a much deeper and breadth level than in the past. Yeah.
Brilliant. Samir, would you like to add? In fact, just before Samir, you take over, I like the thought of how the reskilling of the MedRep is happening. And in this scope, when we talk to clients, they use now a very interesting terminology that we are going to be having augmented reps. So it is the whole AR terminology coming back, saying that, there are people who have relationship with the doctors, and you very brilliantly put it, Manoj. This is really where we need to use our strengths. And how do we now augment them into this new world? Over to you, Samir.
Yeah, I think Manoj made a lot of very, very good points, right? And in fact, I just published a paper by work some time ago on the practicalities of what a pharma company needs to look at while they're going digital. And I think moving on from there, what we're seeing is that digitalization and digital engagement is a reality. But what has happened is in the last 2-3 months, already we're getting into digital fatigue. And a lot of doctors are saying that we are just webinared out now, as in we are just having all these companies contacting us on digital means, plus WhatsApp and phone calls, and we're just tired, right? So I think that curve, which would have taken maybe 4 or 5 years, has suddenly happened in 3 months because everyone's just jumped onto the bandwagon. So again, it goes back to really understanding your HCP, whether it's the doctor or whether it's the pharmacist, and what are their preferred means of communication and what do they find most effective. So recent BCG study data that you'd shared really showed that doctors are preferring group discussions with their peers because that's a chance they don't get otherwise. They're preferring scientific webinars, online sessions with KOLs, CMEs. So that's the kind of stuff that people are preferring. But the problem is, again, if everyone jumps onto that bandwagon, how do you differentiate yourself? Because ultimately it's about differentiating your communication. Otherwise, you're going to be me too. And that's where you'll have multiple angles to play with. So first is, I think pharma really needs to get in people with strong digital consumer experience in terms of communication, so that you can design the right content in the right way, which is effective and impactful. Also, it could be, say, partnership. So when I was at Mandi Pharma and we had an advanced wound care business, we actually partnered with Cleveland Clinic in developing our entire wound care content, which we gave to the doctors, to the nurses, and the healthcare providers. And actually, once they went through all the content, they got a certification from Cleveland Clinic. Now, for a doctor in a Vietnam or in Indonesia or in India, or a nurse, especially actually in a small hospital, for them to get a Cleveland Clinic certificate is phenomenal. They would never dream of getting that. So I think that's the kind of stuff you need to look at, as in how can you genuinely make a difference and stand out in this entire plethora of digital communication, which has suddenly descended over the last 2 months on the doctors. And I think one more thing is, sorry, go on, Susan.
Samir, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think the other part is really one of my favorite topics is the underutilization of email marketing. I think targeted email marketing is such a brilliant tool that still a lot of companies are not realizing how to use them. Now, obviously, you need consent, and consent is a key part of it. But once you get the consent from the doctors, is designing the right emails with the right headings and the right content, again, has fantastically high click-through rates, much higher than any other piece of communication. So utilizing email marketing properly, again, can help you stand out, and it can help you customize and cater your content to actually that particular doctor based on their needs as well.
Absolutely. In fact, the fact that you were speaking about content, and we come from the content side because that's our job every day, to provide communication content. So I always, this goes back to my days when I was in marketing, and from there I, migrated and started my own agency. I always follow this rule of 7, that you really need 7 touch points. And, it always say that you take about 7 times for someone to remember your brand and know more about your product, right? So it is really, the context is not about doing one thing, but you may have 1 or 2 key messages. But how do you kind of look at that whole multiple ways of talking about it and reaching our customer as much as possible, as a reminder, engagement, all of that coming through. And this really works even in this space, because most often we do that inside the clinic. And one of the other point which I thought I must make a mention is, I just read the other day that we always had cycle management, campaign management. So we used to call sometimes, sorry to say this, but a little cheeky, I used to call product managers as cycle managers, because the moment it's cycle time, everyone is scurrying around for doing work, right? But I think the new thinking is, how do we become continuous publishers of great content? You literally become a publishing company. You're not just about doing campaign and content management from in bursts, but literally working round the clock. Because as Manoj, you rightly talked about data. If you're getting real-time data, how do you iterate your strategy? You're not waiting by planning the whole calendar through the year, but you're literally planning it across. Which again brings me to one very contextual point, is that given that content is so important and content is really the king when it comes to this kind of engagement, Manoj, I see a lot of examples of what Bayer is doing globally and also in India, where for women's health, I saw you guys launching apps, and you have something for endometriosis, you have something like a chatbot. Would you like to share some example of or your thoughts on how these are really working? Is this really giving you the real, return on that investment that you're putting into these kind of tools?
Yeah. No, I think thanks for asking that, Susan. I think as a pharma company, we always want to put at the center is the patient, right? So 2 things what we are doing for patients, apart from the R&D work to innovate a new drug, is making sure that the patient understands his disease and is able to manage it better. Yeah. So, and we call it, patient should feel empowered. Yeah. And in that, a lot of efforts are being done to educate the patients without looking at the ROI, because the ROI quotient there is not so easy. Yeah. And if you only look at from an ROI, a lot of investments would overnight be dropped because you don't know. Yeah. But I think the bigger piece there is, can we make patients better aware? Can we help the patient to get credible information? And I'll give you statistics. 47% of women in India do not use any methods of family planning. Yeah, India is the second most populous country in the world. Why are they not using it? Can we learn from their thinking process? Can we inform them better? As a leader in the contraception space, I think it's our responsibility and moral obligations, not purely just as a CSR work, but also it makes a lot of business sense for us to educate and empower and in that we launched the Facebook, chatbot, which of course helps the women because it's personal. It's they are in the society which we live in, and it has incredible. So we have now launched chatbot across many countries: Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, India, and we are doing Facebook live sessions with the KOLs, and some of the tractions is extremely high. In some of the Facebook live sessions, we are getting over 100,000, 500,000 overall views. Yeah. So it's a great way of making sure that the patient understands. So the women today understands, and I think in the Asian context, our whole focus is how do we make our women better aware of the disease or the things which he wants to hear. So we should be having a credible information. So that is one aspect of it. The second is we're also equally working with our lot of partners, and Gentech is one of them, around the whole piece of pharmacovigilance. Yeah, and we say, patient safety, and I think we started with that. Samir talked about when he was talking to the whole consumer brands using the immunity thing. Yeah, and in that sense, few years back we started one day in a year which we call a safety day. Yeah, the whole focus as an organization is that you are in a healthcare industry. You can't do a error. 99 products work, one is not working. That's not in the industry which we are. Yeah. So the whole pharmacovigilance, where we are empowering patients to report their side effects, and the journey of a prescription drug becoming a self-care or as an OTC is primarily because the pharmacovigilance data helps it. Yeah. So looking at data, we now have a tool which is called a Safe Track tool. It's a web-based tool where any patient who is on buyer drug can report. And I think so then the patient feels that I am empowered. I'm not only being informed about what is needed for my disease, and I am able to control it better. I'm able to seek out the right doctors whenever there is a need, but I'm also able to communicate to the company and give back and contribute in a manner which is helpful for the organization and for the society. Yeah. So a lot of initiatives in women's health, but also across other therapeutic areas as well, with the intent that the patient should feel empowered while going through and we trying to give better quality of life.
In fact, it's interesting. One of the questions has come to the is, how should the pharma industry do more to tackle misinformation online? Because this is actually a big concern with a lot of companies, and the more the patients get to know, and they keep depending a lot on the WhatsApp university that you spoke about and the Google, online question answers that they keep posing to. What should the pharma companies do? What should healthcare companies do in this space? I think one of the big opportunity is to set up the whole pharmacovigilance and reputation management. Samir, you have any suggestions additional to what Manoj just mentioned?
I think ultimately you've got to become a brand that is a credible source of information for your patients and consumers, and they've got to trust you that you're going to give them impartial advice. And for that, I would ideally look at something that's unbranded completely. Maybe it's a portal which can give you disease specific information in an unbiased way. And if you can make that really the landing page for your patients and they trust you enough that you'll give them unbiased information, I think that's a huge tick box. And that's what's really needed right now in this era of misinformation.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as we speak, I also know that this is possibly one of the gap areas for a lot of companies, especially in India, because it's not just the multinationals, because multinationals do have a lot of control globally from the way they set up their digital tools. But we have been talking to a lot of clients on looking at reputation management and handling misinformation, because this can be very detrimental to the industry. Yeah. This actually brings to another point, are we going to see more companies developing this whole pill plus program? One of the challenges that we have seen, and when we speak to patients, doctors, we're also seeing around chronic lifestyle conditions, people who are on diabetes, people who have, maybe neurological disorders and mental health. While we know that there is a rise of teleconsult in these specific areas, but how is the industry going to help, these patients? Because it's also, suddenly the patients feel very remote from their doctors. They feel that they are kind of let loose, if I may use that word. And in that scope, there is a terminology which is, of course, been around, digital therapeutics. There have been companies which have collaborated and launched this in a big way. How do you see this space evolving, this whole pill plus way of dealing with patients and managing their diseases? Anything on that, Manoj, that you have to share?
No, I think it's been a growing space over the last many years. Yeah, pill plus is an approach which has a lot of credence to it. One of the challenges I think in India and a lot of other countries is around adherence to therapy in a chronic. Yeah, almost 40 to 50% of patients are not adhering to therapy in spite of knowing that a hypertensive drug or a diabetes drug needs to be taken, and this is irrespective of education level. Earlier in the past you were saying only uneducated people don't adhere, but now there is no such data. Even people in cities also feel good and then they drop their antihypertensive. So a pill plus program or programs along with the disease management, where you are actively engaging the patient and being partner in the journey which he is going through. And we know diabetes is not an easy disease, or a heart failure or a stroke is not an easy disease. So how do we communicate and engage the patient so that he gets information whenever it's needed, and also information around what can help him to live with the disease in a better manner. So I think the pill plus programs are extremely good. Adding digital therapeutics where you're using also artificial intelligence to customize that, to personalize it. Because I think if you have one program and all 2,000 diabetes patients or 20,000 diabetes patients get the same flyer or an emailer, that won't really help today. So at what stage each patient is. So I think there are a lot of analytics and data which are being used in the digital therapeutics worlds are being used. We are also doing a little bit of stuff there as well. It would have an impact. So that is one way to look at it, Susan. But I also feel there is another way to look at it, because if we are looking at a patient who is having diabetes, he is not on one pill. He is on multiple pills. He is also on kidney drug. He is also on hypertensive. He is on cholesterol drugs. He is on platelets. So a third party collaboration where there are companies who are focusing on that, and that's a space which is gradually getting richer, and it makes a lot of sense where pharma companies or stakeholders who can play a role, because our major competence is in R&D, in making a product which is safe and innovative and communicating science. That's our competence. Now in that, if there is a companies which are focusing and have digital, that's the reason why you see partnership. So rather than having own platform, I also see increasing usage where the patients then gets everything under one roof, rather than on one disease he's on pill plus program with Bayer, for other he's with Mundi Pharma. So I think that's where a lot of focus would also, and I think partnership is also one way of looking at it.
It well, because going ahead, these collaborations are going to be very important, and you're not going to recreate everything. It will be a more co-creation model. Samir, do you see this in that part of the world, especially in Southeast Asian market? I mean, we know what we are seeing in India, but how are markets in SEA responding to such opportunities? When it comes to managing chronic patients in their countries.
Right. I think the phenomena is the same everywhere, right? And there are some countries that are more progressive than others, but I think pharma companies finally getting to managing the entire symptoms and the patients in a holistic manner. I think that's what's really changing, and what needs to change. And one of the things that COVID has done is also thrown up the entire thing around mental health, which has become such a big no-no in terms of discussion, and now suddenly that's come to the forefront. But also it's patients recognizing, and even healthcare professionals recognizing the benefits of stuff like mindfulness and meditation, and which goes beyond just the regular pill plus program, right? Because now you're treating the patient in its entirety. So how can you offer this to a patient and look at the patient as a whole to really get the best outcomes beyond your own pills, and which has no commercial benefit to you, but actually benefits the patient quite significantly. And obviously, partnerships are going to be critical from a health tech point of view, because the pharma companies don't have the technical capabilities, most of them, which the health tech startups have. So, for example, AliveCore, which is a US-based company, they launched their entire cardiac care, which basically you have your own ECG device at home, and it gives you medical grade ECGs on the spot. It gets uploaded to your doctor. And so for a company that's in the cardiac space, you partner with a company like that and give a much more holistic presentation to the patient. I think that's what really the patients will appreciate.
Yeah. And having said that, I think there are a couple of interesting questions, but I thought one which I felt was, in continuation with what you just spoke. What are the most critical data challenges in the pharma industry? Because we all know that this data sometimes sits very especially when we are doing these collaborations and co-creation, you're not having access to data. There's also a privacy issue of data. What are, these challenges, and how do you think we should be able to navigate these challenges? Manoj, any thoughts on that?
The patient data is absolutely something which, as an industry and more importantly as biopharma, we do not want to see it as much as we can. Individual patient data is absolutely something which is very, very private. And we are very clear. And so most of the Pill Plus programs are being run by third parties. And we have clear contracts suggesting what we can look at it and what we can't. Yeah. But an aggregate level, I think analytics is something which does helps, yeah, and it creates a win-win. At the end, what a patient is looking at it, that his individual data points are not being looked at it, but the pharma industry and particularly the research-driven pharma companies can also help that to give me a better product or better management, and also help in the future research. So I think those data points can, in an aggregate manner, which does not reveal individual privacy. So that I think is important. For marketing, all our SCP data, whether it's doctors, specialists, unless until we have a consent, we don't send them an email. Yeah. So we are making sure that our sales reps are not using WhatsApp for brand promotions or messages for brand promotions. Yeah. Or for any promotional effort unless until the consent is not there. And if the consent is there, we also only use approved channels which are there so that the doctor is fully informed. At any point of time, I think we can only do this service to the industry by misflaunting the access which we have currently with our customers. So I think the data could be sent. It does pose challenge because every country is looking at data very differently. Yeah, I think that is very important. But that's a given when you operate in any country. I think the first thing which you always do is look at the local laws and make sure that your processes and your work and your teams understand what is the local law. So I think, yeah, it does pose a challenge, but I think we are very mindful of that, when we say patient safety, the data of the patient and the doctor is absolutely sacrosanct.
Fabulous. So I'm going to ask one closing question to both of you. We are almost there with terms of time. We have a very, very provocative title, Leapfrogging into the Future. So just from your point of view, what would be the most, 2 or 3 definitive changes that our industry is going to experience going ahead? And just, in one line, how do you think they should be steering in that direction to address these challenges? So Samir, you want to take this first?
Yeah, so I think first for me, as in telemedicine is a given. It's here to stay, and it's only going to grow. So that's something we've talked about. So I'm not going to get into too much of detail. I think e-pharmacies is again a big thing that's going to happen, as in the US and Germany have been allowing it for a long time. India, still the regulations are not in place, but you've got pharmacies coming in. But it's just a matter of time. E-pharmacies have to grow in sync with telemedicine. Otherwise, it's just not going to succeed. So I think e-pharmacies will obviously impact the entire model from a pharma company point of view, as in how do you engage with them? How do you promote there on the e-pharmacy platforms? So a lot of consumer marketing skills will come into play there. And the last part for me is really looking at the success of crowdsourcing for solutions is becoming a big part of it. So just last night, as in Jim Cramer and Mark Benioff of Salesforce announced the entire development of a new mask, where they're saying that people are just not wearing a mask because it's not cool, it's not comfortable, you can't breathe properly. And they partnered with X Prize actually to give $1 million prize. And the people who are going to design it are people between 15 to 24 years old. And it's a problem that no company is willing to look at, of saying that how do we actually develop a better mask which is more socially acceptable, more comfortable, but still gives the safety of a medical grade mask. And I think this entire crowdsourcing of solutions is going to go there more and more because wherever there's less commercial benefit and attractiveness, it's only crowdsourcing where you'll get the right results. So I think that's a trend that's set to continue.
Fabulous. Manoj, I'm sure you would have something more to add to this. We can't hear you, Manoj.
I'm unmuted now, so I think it's centrally done. So what Samir said makes a lot of sense. I won't repeat that. But to me, I think 2 things which would stand out as we will continue to live in COVID and after COVID as well is one around people. I think the organizations will look at it, people. in a very, very different manner. Yeah, both from a skill sets, but also on other parameters. What should be the structure? Yeah, rigid structures, flexible structures, and I think we talked about in the beginning on work from home, but the whole, how does the organization structure looks like? And I think that's and what sort of people would come and work. So that is one thing which I think is something which I'm watching this space. The second is around business model. Yeah, and partly to what Samir said is, what sort of business model would survive? I think from a traditional perspective, the industry's business model has not changed over the last 10, 15 years so much. Yeah. But now we are forced to do many changes, and there would be a role to play of partnerships, of digital, but I think the whole focus on driving revenues through a different business models would be extremely critical. And I think that's a space which industry has an opportunity to do a lot of changes there. Yeah? So those are the two things which I will stick my neck in.
Yeah. Fabulous. In fact, I must tell you that in a letter to the shareholders in 1986, the legendary Warren Buffett gave us an idiom that has made the rounds in every downturn since. Be greedy when others are fearful. But the full quote makes even more relevance today. It makes the case to invest in marketing and sales and supply chain and all of that if your business is able to, and reap the rewards in the future as your brand builds traction with key clients during a period of turmoil. So with this, I would like to thank Manoj and Samir. It was a brilliant discussion. I learned a lot. I think there is so much to navigate around this whole space, and it's almost like you're possibly doing it real time. We're all going through this grind as we are speaking, and that's what makes it more interesting, because this is not just about some preachy lines to be written, but actually to be implemented. And I would like to thank you so much for this.
No, thanks a lot. Thank you, Susan, for having us here. And thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Handing over the mic to you. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a hugely insightful session. I can see we had a lot of questions coming in, and thank you for being so candid in sharing your responses. Just want to draw everybody's attention to our next webinar. We're touching on a lot of the topics that were brought up today, and we're looking at, on the 20th of July, we're looking at conversational commerce. So how can you use things like chatbots, etc., to communicate with your customers? So we have two experts who are already in this space, so we might see you as attendees on the 20th of July. Susan, Samir, Manoj, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope you can join us again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye.